So the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes? Alec?
Alec Dennis, Business Management. Just one clarification. I'd like to thank President Laffin for his email clarification and like the statement on November 5th regarding the vetoes of AO3 and AO4. In light of this, and because there were several kind of moments of correcting the record to sort of prevent any confusion going forward, could we enter his full email into the record of today's meeting just so that, you know, everybody knows what happened and we can go forward from that?
Are there any objections to including Dan's email from November 5th, I think you said, into the record? Seeing none, the minutes will be so amended. Are there any objections to approving the amended minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. With that, we will move on to other old business, which is our leftover legislation from the last meeting. The first is GSG A40A05, which is an act to support graduate students and campus student groups in advocating anti-racist policies. I will go ahead and share my screen such that folks can see the legislation. Without objection, I'll enter the text of the legislation into the record so that I don't have to sit here and read it to you all, except that now I can't share my screen. No, got it, okay. Okay, if either the authors or the sponsors of the resolution want to say anything in support of it, now is the time to do so.
Rob Delka, Physics Department. So I just want to give a quick background on this and what we hope it will accomplish if passed. So this act was written with input from a group of graduate students in the Physics Department. And this group has been pushing our department for certain changes to the policies and programs to improve the experience for Black students in our department. The student group began around the time of Shutdown STEM, hashtag Shutdown STEM. And they began with an open letter to the department. This letter outlined how the department has failed to support Black students in the past, and then gave specific recommendations to improve the experience for all graduate students in the future. This letter was signed by 100 physics graduate students and alumni. And so far, the department has slow-walked a lot of the recommendations that we made, and just recently has created a climate committee, which kind of serves the purpose of what a diversity and inclusion committee would do in other departments. And when I came to GSG, it was clear that there was other efforts from other grad students in various departments working for similar issues and working for similar policies. And so I thought that we as GSG should be able to support these students in their efforts. And so this act aims to do that through supporting groups financially when they host events, building connections between groups, and by enabling the sharing of resources and strategies between these students. And so the specific text of the act is shown on the screen, but I'll let either of my co-sponsors, Misty or Alec, chime in if they have anything else to say about it.
Alec Dennis, Business Management. I'll just go on and say one thing, like specifically, kind of the real operative change here is it basically gives a little bit more of a specific charge to GSG's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, basically as well as the Executive Committee to try to encourage these sorts of anti-racist policies, and then. Again, the executive committee trying to encourage them to amplify kind of some of the calls for change from student groups. And then specifically, this also directs the Budget and Finance Committee whenever we are evaluating event funding requests to take into account kind of the impact of these events on these sort of diversity and inclusion goals. So it's kind of, those are the three, it's basically, let's help promote this sort of objective. And then also let's try to put our money where our mouth is, if you will, and try to make sure to help fund events that could aid this process.
Hi, this is Lucy from Communication. I'm also a co-sponsor of this bill, and I just wanted to say that the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and we did meet this morning in anticipation of this act, hopefully potentially passing. We discussed kind of what we might do next, and one of the things we're looking to do is to help facilitate the collection of resources and challenges and stories from all the different departments in terms of efforts that have happened in the physics department and what progress has been made. And the way we're hoping to do that is by creating a fairly informal questionnaire that we would then ask each of you to go back to your department and kind of complete along with your constituents to just try to help us understand what's working and not working in your departments in terms of anti-racism efforts, and then be able to share those resources cross-departmentally, because we feel like one of the big challenges is that we're all kind of siloed, and it's really hard to have a central place to find resources, know what other people are struggling with in their departments, and kind of address those things together. So that's kind of what we're looking toward doing if this passes, and hopefully that would be something we would get out to all of you in early December.
Excellent. With the act being introduced, I'll now open debate on GSG A40 A05. Are there any comments, questions, concerns from the Assembly? Laura McBride.
If no one has anything, or Laura McBride Chemistry, I was going to motion to vote, but I thought I saw someone else's hand raised.
I believe Autumn was also going to motion to vote. So great work out of everybody. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to moving to vote on GSG A40 A05? Hearing no objections, we will now vote on the act to support graduate students and campus student groups in advocating anti-racist policies. Edie, do we have polls set up? There it is. And I'll leave it open for 30 seconds, as is our custom. And with time expiring, the yeas are 23, the noes are 0, and the abstentions are 1. The motion is agreed to. Excellent. Next on the agenda is GSG A40 R04, a resolution requesting that President Pines hold a town hall with the international graduate student community. I'll go ahead and share that on the screen. And if the author or sponsors would like to introduce it, without objection, I'll enter the text into the record. Hearing none, it is so ordered. If the author or sponsors would like to speak on behalf of the resolution, now's the time.
Hi, everyone. This is Christina from the economics department. So with Misty, we drafted this resolution. Our goal with this resolution is to have a space to voice our concerns directly with President Pines, so we can have some answers regarding some particular issues that affect international graduate students in our community. We're particularly concerned with the problems regarding graduate assistantships being tied to international students staying in the US, which is a policy that has no much margins for us to do. And also there has been some issues, for example, with international students having problems with renewing their visas, given that they have to stay in the US, but a lot of international students don't have funding for their 5th year when their visa is expiring. So there's a lot of little issues that are making lives for international students more difficult, and having a space to talk this with President Pines would be a great way to search for a way to reduce the harshness on international students. We also want to talk to him about international fees and other concerns that have been in the past in the international students community that have been trying to challenge before, but with no success. So we hope that this would be a space to seek unity, cohesion. I don't know if you have something to add, Misty.
No, I think that's a great summary, Christina.
All right, with the legislation introduced, I'll open debate. Alec.
Alec Dennis, Business and Management. I definitely see the problems that place facing international students. My program is majority international students, and so I've seen a lot of the headaches they've been having to deal with. And I was just wondering if we wanted to, rather than just simply ask for a town hall, if we had anything else more specific, like actionable that we wanted, or if we wanted to kind of say like push President Pines to do, because to me, I mean, requesting a town hall I think is a great idea. I was just wondering if we wanted to go a step further in our requests, like wanting to review these sorts of, asking that he review these sorts of policies, calling on him to change the guidelines around XYZ. Like, do we want to try to push a little bit more, or do we feel like just having a request for a town hall would be sufficient?
Christina or Misty, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I'll say something, but Christina, of course, chime in. I will say, I think for the reasoning behind a town hall is that it seems like an easy and obvious yes, right? I mean, because President Pines has had these kind of gatherings with other constituents, and I think the concern is it's easier to say no if we start getting into requesting like specific types of changes, and that really having the conversation with President Pines could be more productive, I think, in some ways. But I mean, I guess, so that was kind of the reasoning behind choosing the request for a town hall versus perhaps doing a resolution that would call on President Pines to specifically clarify the student fee or do something else super specific. So that was that's how I could voice the thought process, but I don't know, of course, Christina, please chime in here.
Yeah, so I will add that a lot of these concerns, I'm not sure where the obstacles are, and I don't know if President Pines has the authority to get rid of some of these obstacles. So maybe having the chance to talk to him and voice all these concerns, we can have some more clarity about what is that we need to write resolutions about. Because the last time that we talked about this, I think that both of you presented this issue to President Pines in the opportunity that we had him here in an assembly. He didn't know, and on emails he said that this was something that other person had explained to him why there was little space to do things. So I think that talking to him, having him heard us, might shed some light about what should we do next. But I agree that we should be pushing this forward at some point. Yeah.
Laura.
Laura McBride, Chemistry, motion to vote.
There is a motion to vote. Is there a second?
Seconded.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to moving to vote on GSG A40R04? Seeing no objections, Edie? Again, the voting will be open for 30 seconds if you need that extra time to consider your vote. With time expiring, the yeses are 23, The noes are 0 and the abstentions are 1. The motion is agreed to. There are some comments in the chat that I want to provide a little bit more context to. Blessing points out that the international student physical presence is a state mandate. We did hear yesterday at a graduate council meeting, Dan and I are on the graduate council, from Dean Federer that the Maryland Attorney General has issued guidance that changes how that says international students have to be in the US. So we're going to be following up with them to get more information on that as well. But yes, that is good information in the chat that I wanted to draw people's attention to, and we'll continue to work on that particular issue. Okay. The next on the agenda is GSG A40 R05, a resolution to support collective bargaining for student employees in the University System of Maryland. I will go ahead and share that. And if the author or any of the many sponsors would like to make a comment, now is the time.
Hi, this is Kyle Stelzer, History Department. Yeah, so this resolution kind of calls solidarity and support for efforts towards collective bargaining for graduate students. It's the same resolution that's been passed past several years in kind of this longstanding effort towards the right to collectively bargain. So I think the main, I'd welcome other input from several co-sponsors as well. Thank you to those who co-sponsored. Yeah, the main point is it's not about forming a union right now. This isn't an act to form a union. It's about the right to collectively bargain in the future, and the right to approve any sort of affiliation or contract in the future. So typically has kind of widespread support amongst the GSG, but yeah, I'd welcome any input from any of the co-sponsors as well.
Sorry, I was muted. With the act having been introduced, we'll now open debate. Alec.
Alec Dennis, Business and Management. A question for the co-authors. In the therefore, it says, therefore, graduate student government supports the changing this by repealing and reenacting with amendments, article, state personnel pension, section 3, yada, yada, yada. What exactly are the amendments you're calling for? What is that? Because I feel like if we're going to be passing a resolution, we should be specific in saying what is the text that we are suggesting replacing things with.
So I can sort of, not really, but sort of answer that question. This is language that was taken directly from the bill that gets introduced in the Maryland House, the Maryland State Legislature. So that's why it's in there from past years. And so there are all sorts of small little amendments that have to be made. So that doesn't mean we have to specify exactly that, but that's the explanation of why that language is in there from previous years.
So, I mean, we are calling for a change in law. And so what are we wanting it changed to? I mean, I feel like we should, if we're going to make a statement, we should be very clear what we are actually stating, not just saying we want there to be changes, because I think that that could be materially relevant to, you know, our actions here, because we should know what language we're endorsing before we endorse it.
Janelle?
Yeah, Janelle Walker, Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies. I hear what you're saying, Alec, about having specific language, but I would feel uncomfortable, I think, and I wonder what other people think about this, about asserting our own assumptions about what the proper legal language would be in this case, especially considering that, I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legislator. So I just want to make sure that we're not committing as a body to a set of language officially that is ultimately going to be fruitless and and not persuasive at the state legislature. So I understand what you're saying, Alec, and I agree that I think specificity is going to be our friend here. But what I don't want to do is take an extra step that's actually going to work against us in the future.
In that case, then I motion to amend the bill to remove all language referring to repealing and reenacting with amendments, those things there, because if we're not committing to actually staying what those amendments should be, we shouldn't be voting to endorse changing that.
So your amendment would remove what I have highlighted on the screen.
That is correct.
Essentially, okay. So we have a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. We'll now debate the motion to amend. Are there any comments on the amendment? Janelle, is that a new hand up or just a?
It is, it's a new hand.
Okay, then go for it.
I just want to clarify. So in terms of taking out this specific language, I guess I'm confused about the intention here, because I thought your concern, Alec, was about being specific. And I feel like in this case, we are being quite specific about what law we would like to be addressed. I think again, how we use specificity is going to be really important here. And when we're advocating in Annapolis and when we're talking to Dean Fetter, being specific about the law is very helpful. But I think that like we have to be aware of our limitations, right? Like I don't want us to take out, if that makes sense, like the specificity of our contention with the law so that later on, you know, I don't know. I think that we're actually working backwards by taking it out rather than helping the amendment, because I think specificity is in for this particular thing really important, because when we go to negotiate, we don't want to say like, in general, we think, you know, graduate employment law is a problem. We want to be clear that we know what we're talking about and that this is our contention as advocates and not, you know, legislators. Whereas I think that it's perfectly within our rights to name the law we have an issue with.
We can't have our cake and eat it too. We have to either be general and vague in saying we want there to be changes, or if we are suggesting being so specific as to say by repealing and reenacting with amendments, this one here, we need to be able to say what we're repealing and reenacting it with. Like, you know, I think if we're saying that we're saying to repeal and reenact with amendments, we need to actually have suggested language. If we don't have suggested language, then to me, it almost provides false specifications. Whereas like, so we should either be general and just strip out that language, or if we're going to be that specific, we need to actually follow through and have our specific language in mind.
I might propose then, because I think that there's maybe a way to address both of our concerns here, and I would be very happy to hear what the rest of the body thinks about this, but I think we can keep the name of the article that we're concerned about, but perhaps the piece about with amendments could be removed so that it says instead to negotiate their conditions of employment in a legally binding way by repealing and reenacting article so-and-so. So then we're being very clear about what we want, but we're not proposing we're not, as you say, we're not implying that we're proposing legislation we're not ready to speak to.
So we'll get some more comments in just a second. I would say from a legal point of view, we wouldn't want to say by repealing and reenacting this exact code, because then we're just putting the same thing in that we just took out. But that's the exact wording of the amendment is obviously up to the assembly. Valerie.
I see that Viana has already actually posted some of this in the comments, but from 2013, the section 3-101 speaks specifically to definitions, including collective bargaining. Section 3-102 is where it specifically states that student employees of the universities are not able to be part of collective bargaining. Specifically, it's 9 IV4. A student employee, including a teaching assistant or comparable position, fellow or postdoctoral intern, is on the excluded list. And then 3-403 speaks to the determination of appropriateness of bargaining units. So the language that's in question here is all of the stuff pertaining specifically to University of Maryland students and other students throughout the University of Maryland system not being able to collectively bargain. in that regard, I think it's appropriate to keep this language in the bill, or in the resolution rather.
Okay. Tamara.
Hi, Tamara Allertike. So I want to thank you, Valerie, for clarifying, because you answered some of my questions about the exact language that is in question. I have to wonder if we are going to talk about the specificity here, about what language to include. It sounds like that is something that is very doable. And if we are not qualified specifically to make these specifications, we have people at our disposal who would be willing to help us make that exact language if we wanted to. So.
Okay. Yehuda.
So I would suggest an alternate amendment, which I think would address the concern, which would be: the graduate student government supports efforts to legalize collective bargaining as a method for graduate employees to negotiate their conditions of employment in a legally binding way by repealing and reenacting the appropriate sections of the Maryland State Code. And then you could say, if people strongly want to keep it, you could say possibly including or something like that. But that would allow people to specify the appropriate sections themselves. And we're just saying in general, we know it's the law, but we're not experts on it.
Okay. So we'll dispense with, not dispense with, we'll deal with Alec's amendment first, and then we can move on to Yehuda's proposed amendment. Viana.
Hi, Viana Newman-Dennis, Art History and Archaeology. Yes, so I was, as this was all going on, trying to find the relevant language. I was finally able to locate the most recent version. It's organized very differently than 2013. I do think it is good to have this or similar specificity, as other people have mentioned. GSG and other graduate student groups have worked on this for years. We don't want to make it seem like we're just coming at this fresh and very vaguely. So I would argue for having reference to these specific sections, or like Yehuda suggested, saying such as these sections, although I think we should update it to 2019 since that's the most recent version.
And as the author of this amendment, I would actually be quite content with Yehuda's suggested rewording.
Okay, in that case, you can withdraw your amendment, and we'll just make it Yehuda's.
I'll withdraw my amendment and second Yehuda's amendment instead.
Okay, so that would be by repealing and replacing, Yehuda, you said, the appropriate sections of State of Maryland, the annotated Code of Maryland. Okay, and so it would say,
so remove with amendments and say
including
article. You could say,
sorry, go ahead.
So it would say that. Is that your amendment?
One second. I'm reading it again.
Absolutely.
Take out the comma after reenacting.
Good point.
Does it make sense? And I don't have an opinion one way or the other. Would it make sense if the sections from including was in parentheses?
The
idea being to make it secondary. The point is, we know it's a law and we've done our research, but we're not lawyers.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Including the word including, not after the word including.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, that looks appropriate to me.
Should you get rid of the comma after Maryland?
Yes, you should from a grammatical perspective.
And then also this comma, I think. No, it's part of the list. Okay, Viana.
Viana Newman Dennis, Art History and Archaeology. I don't know if I need a formal amendment or just amend the Yehuda's amendment to get rid of 2015 replacement, 2018 blah, 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 and change it to just 2019, or I don't know if it's called the,
Let's see what its title is.
2019 Maryland Code.
Maryland Code. Yeah, it's not a supplement, it's an updated code.
I don't think it just needs, I think just 2019 by itself is enough.
Oh,
This
right,
is
because it
already
just says
annotated
annotated
code.
code of Maryland. Yep. Okay. Rob.
Rob Delka, physics. This might just be me trying to read through it, but to me, it seems that this amendment right now would just entail repealing and then reenacting the exact same article without any changes. And to me, it seems that like, I don't know if this is just making it more confusing or not, but I wanted to just address that point.
So would you say, so instead of repealing and reenacting, you could just say modifying?
Yeah, that I think that's fine. I just think it should be clear that we don't want to get rid of something and then replace it with the exact same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, repealing and reenacting is, you know, what they put in the actual legislation in the State House, but we don't need that.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was a legalese that I wasn't sure of,
Okay.
or what it was.
Yes, Simon, that's fine with me.
Okay, then we'll
By
just
modifying. You still need the
Yeah,
word by.
by. Yep. That's. Nope. That one's highlighted in green. Valerie.
Valerie Hall, Anthropology. I am not familiar with legal language or with these types of titles and bills, but I'm concerned that the subtitle 3 that Viana provided the link to does not contain the same language that we've been discussing here. For example, if you read through the rights of the employee clause, it doesn't specify university students being excluded, for example. And since that's a really key part of what we're talking about, I'm wondering if some of these more recent updates don't include the language that we're specifically concerned about, and if we should keep the 2015 and 2018 dates as were originally in the resolution. I don't know if anybody out there can answer that question.
I'm looking for it right now.
Whereas to me, this is the danger of having something this specific, is because we might be misstating things. And so that's why, part of the reason why I was originally intending, why don't we just strip out this specificity, so we don't have this question of, are we referring to the right act? What exactly is the text we're suggesting? What exactly, like, we can close off a lot of these potential inaccuracies by just not having that language. Because if we do have that language, then we kind of need to get it right, or else what's the point?
I think the language is still there. You just have, it's the table of contents has changed, so you need a bunch of different links, but I think everything that is still, the text is the same.
Viana.
Viana Newman Dennis, Art History and Archaeology. I'm sorry, just to clarify, are we talking about 3102? Because I am comparing them and they do look very different between 2013 and 2019.
Yeah, I think there was a rework of code. So one of the things that happens when you repeal and replace with amendment is that you also have clauses that change the numbering of like all of state code, is what ends up happening often. So that's probably what has happened here. And so you're probably correct that this no longer refers to the accurate sections of state code. That doesn't surprise me too much.
It's still titled, though, Collective Bargaining Rights of Employees and Employers. I think, is Valerie, are you seeing that?
I do see that, but I guess my concern is that the specific language that we're concerned about is the part that excludes graduate students from being able to collectively bargain. And if that text appears in the 2013 version and is still applicable from the 2013 version, then should that be the text that we're specifically calling out?
But the 2013 text
So-
has already
so
been
I-
repealed.
The appropriate text here in 3102 is in B. This title does not apply to. Number 9, employee of the University System of Maryland. IV, a student employee. So it is still there.
Okay, as long as the text is still there, I have no concerns. I'm having trouble navigating and finding where that text actually is in the 2019 version, but if you have found it and feel confident about it, then I'm fine.
I would also, perhaps we should just table this discussion until we can actually just verify these things so that we're not trying to rapidly verify the language during the middle of a GSG assembly meeting.
So that would be a motion to refer to committee.
Motion to refer to committee, just so we can clean up the language and make sure that we're actually saying the right things.
I second.
All right, the motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to, actually we need a specific committee.
Would the, since this is most pertaining to, I forget the exact name in the most recent one, but like basically the governance, not governance, but like the in government policy, like that one
The
there.
Legislative Action Committee.
Legislative, I would propose we refer it to the Legislative Action Committee so that they can actually get the language correct.
Seconded.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to referring to Yehuda?
So I'd like to ask, are you asking to send this amended text, or should we finish this amendment, or do you want to send the original text?
What I would just say is, why don't we send because we're still trying to hash out and we haven't closed out this amendment, I would just say, let's just refer the original text back to the Legislative Action Committee, and we can hopefully, though I would encourage the Legislative Action Committee to at least take a look at some of these edits as they're trying to rewrite the bill.
Okay, Dan.
I just wanted to confirm that the Legislative Action Committee will be able to meet before December 4th, which is our next assembly. Will that be possible?
I am sure that the vice chair will make me schedule a meeting before we meet at our next time. So yes, we'll make sure it happens.
Excellent, thanks.
All right, with those dispensed with, are there any objections to sending to the Legislative Action Committee for further revision? Hearing none.
Oh, so I was going to say I would like to vote on the amendment as it is, knowing that where it says specifically section 3-403, we know that that one's wrong, but I suggest, since we were in the amendment process, that we finish that amendment.
Okay, so there is an objection to the motion to send it to the Legislative Action Committee. So the
motion
process
to vote on this particular amendment then.
So Alec is withdrawing his amendment to set his motion to send it to the Legislative Action Committee and instead motioning to vote on this amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so now we obviously don't have a poll prepared for this one, but we are now voting on making this the amended version of the bill, which we can guess will probably then be sent back to the Legislative Action Committee. So if you would use your participants tab, if you approve of the current amendment, vote yes. If you do not approve of the current amendment, vote no. And I'll leave it open for 30 seconds as best I can tell. And with time expiring, the yeses are 18, the noes are 1. The amendment is agreed to.
And now I'd like to propose we refer this particular bill to the Legislative Action Committee.
There's a motion to refer the bill to the Legislative Action Committee. Is there a second?
Seconded.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to sending the bill to the Legislative Action Committee? Hearing none, we will send the bill back to the Legislative Action Committee. And with that, we have dispensed with the old business. And so we will now move on to new business, of which I am basically presenting. So this comes from some constitutional and bylaws requirements that we have the president nominate folks to various external committees that give the GSG a seat. There are dozens of them. There are so many committees that would like a member of GSG to give them some time. Not all of them in the estimation of the executive committee are worth the time of graduate students for us to actively look for someone who we think we need someone on this committee. Of course, if there are committees that are not on this list that you know of at the university that are looking for graduate representation, we are happy to nominate you or someone else to that committee if you think it's particularly important. But these are the committees that we have identified that we don't currently have an official representative on, that we believe it is important for us to put an official representative on. The goal at this meeting is not necessarily identify who's going to be on each of these committees. The goal here is to draw your attention to these committees. And if you would please let us know if you are willing to serve on one of these committees. I've already gotten a couple of emails from folks from when I sent out the agenda that they are willing to serve on some of these committees. If you are willing to serve, the process is that you are then nominated you are appointed actually by the president. And that's actually it. I thought for a while that the assembly had to approve of those appointments, but I read through the bylaws again to try to find that requirement, and it doesn't appear that it exists. So really, you're just contacting Dan and saying, I'm willing to serve on this committee, and then I cannot imagine Dan and then Dan appoints or nominates folks to the committees. If you have questions about any of these committees, you can ask them now. If you'd like to nominate yourself during this meeting, we're happy to take nominations during this meeting, but if you don't want to do it in public and you just want to email us separately, that is also fine. Dan.
I just wanted to mention there are a few on this list that I am sitting in on like an ad hoc basis. Like, for example, at the top of my head, mental health accessibility, Board of Governors, Board of Trustees. I'm happy to keep doing that, but if if you're so compelled to quote unquote replace me, I won't be offended. And if there's also some on the list that you think are really compelling to have me or one of the execs sit in on in the short term, at least until someone gets nominated, please let us know. I don't have the capacity to be sitting on these dozens of committees, but I can add one or two more if it is really a top priority. That was it.
Okay, are there any comments or questions on the external committees? Laura.
Laura McBride, chemistry. One that's kind of standing out to me right here is the Campus Infectious Disease Management Committee. And a question I had was, does that cover our COVID response?
So this,
and if it, okay, go ahead, sir.
It's a pre-existing committee. It existed pre-COVID, but I imagine it will deal with the aftermath of COVID. There are a ton of COVID-specific committees on which the graduate representation has been Annie, who was president last year. Dan has been in on many of those meetings. I've sat in on some of those meetings. Those have less requirements that a GSG member be offered a seat because they were set up over the course of 2 weeks to deal with the university's COVID response. But if you have a particular interest in dealing with that, that's probably a good committee to start out on, because I'd imagine that committee will deal with all of those other committees as well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to be on it, but I was to Dan's point, if no one else wants to be on it, it might maybe be beneficial to have Dan in the interim be on it, just because as we recover from COVID, and if this committee starts to, have some talks about what to do, I think it could be important to have a voice there.
Okay. Kristen.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. I'm on the honor council for undergrad and grad student, what would it be, Office of Student Conduct, I think. Basically just when they have hearings for people who have violated the academic code in some way. And I know they're always looking for grad students because usually we're short on those. So if you're interested in joining, you can either email me or I can give you the contact information. It's not like a formal committee like this, but I know that they're always looking for grad students to help out on that stuff.
Great. Tamara.
I guess I just have a question about, with most of these committees, what does the time commitment usually look like?
So that definitely varies by committee. We have a spreadsheet that gives what we generally believe the time commitment to be. So if you have specific questions about a specific committee, I'm happy to do my best to answer those questions, although if they're lying to us, there's not much we can do about that. So generally these committees meet either once a month or like once or twice a semester, is generally, I think the modal outcomes of when these committees meet. So that I think is sort of the average time commitment, but again, it's going to vary by committee.
Thank you.
Valerie.
I just wanted to point out that Blessing had noted in the comments that the PhD Career Pathways Conference also needs a GSG rep.
Yeah, and I will add that to our one to specifically, because here's what I'll tell you. If we don't get volunteers for things, we're going to start volunteering people. I mean, not really. We'll specifically come to you and ask you, do you have the time and energy to sit on these committees? Because these are very important committees that we think graduate student voices should be heard on, or we'll ask. Anyway, so if we don't get volunteers, we will more actively search people out. And so I'll add that to our list to actively search people out on as well. Kristen?
Sorry, I just forgot to put my hand down. Never mind.
Okay, fair enough. Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that at least in the LACE committee, we've discussed, I think, 3 of these external committees, the ones dealing with like College Park and City University partnership. My point being that a lot of these committees or external committees might be best referred to GSG committees as well, in case there aren't specific people volunteering.
Yep, that's the strategy if people don't volunteer, is ask the particular committee chairs to ask their committee for volunteers a little bit more specifically. So it's already on my spreadsheet who I'm going to ask if nobody volunteers. So you all should be very afraid of my emails. Dan.
I also just wanted to mention, because I see one in my inbox, someone is very proactive. If you are not compelled to, stand up right now and declare which one you want to serve on, if you want to just email me, that's perfectly fine as well. My email is just danlaffin@comcast.net because I live in 2004 where we use Comcast emails. But I'll put that in the chat as well.
Any other questions, concerns, jokes?
Valerie Hall, Anthropology. Is there a list posted anywhere of all of the current representatives on GSG? Because I have someone in mind that I would like to nominate for a committee, but I don't know if they're currently a part of the assembly because I don't see them here today.
Actually, parliamentary inquiry, for a lot of these things, I'm not even sure if they need to be a GSG member. They just need to be a graduate student member, like a graduate student. And so even if they aren't.
That is correct. Dan can name other graduate students to these committees. The only requirement is that they then report back to GSG. If Dan names them, they have to report back to us. I think the bylaws say once a semester what has happened on that committee during that semester. So they don't necessarily have to be, but there are lists of our current GSG members. I'm actually constitutionally required to maintain one. It should be in the shared drive. Everyone should have access to it, but if you don't, I'll make sure that it gets put there probably after our exec committee meeting tomorrow. Laura.
Laura McBride, Chemistry. I guess point of information. Do we have to let you know if we're currently serving on a committee that's not on this slide?
It would be nice for us to know. There's no necessary requirement. If the external committee doesn't care whether you're actually named by Dan, there's not a ton that we can do to stop random graduate students from serving on random committees that exist. But we would like sort of a roster of the committees that we might want graduate students to serve on. And so knowing that there is a graduate student serving on it would be helpful. But in regards to your specific question, I actually already have you on the list as on the committee that you emailed me about earlier.
I'm also on another one that's
okay. Then email again.
So I'll email that too.
Excellent. Thank you. Dan.
I also wanted to mention, Edie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the website's assembly tab or whichever tab lists all of our reps is up to date. So you can go look at your own name among the others if you're trying to confirm that someone is or is not a GSG rep.
Yes.
All right, cool.
Great. Okay, if there are no other questions about the external committees, then the rest of the meeting time, we technically could meet for another hour and 5 minutes if folks are interested, is what we call Representatives Forum, which we haven't had for the last several meetings because we've jam-packed our schedule, where you can discuss just about anything you think is relevant to graduate students. Yeah. Yehuda.
So Yehuda Katz, computer science and previous parliamentarian, and with that sort of hat on, I think a specially called meeting is supposed to really focus on the things it was called for. So I'm not sure if it's really appropriate to have a representatives forum or discuss any other potential legislation. We did the business we were called for, and I think then we leave.
That's entirely fair. I will say that the Rules Committee on which you sit approved 20 minutes of Representatives Forum. So
I know, I changed my mind.
So if people would like to end the assembly meeting, that's perfectly reasonable. We're happy to do it. But if there are particular issues, I'm at least happy to maintain the assembly meeting just to chat with people.
Or perhaps, like Dennis, Business and Management, we could end the assembly meeting and not have any actual votes or no binding votes, however, and thus end the recording. However, since this representatives forum is mainly just a chance for us to like raise issues, we can still have continued conversation, even if it's no longer an official meeting.
That also works for me. I'm happy to stay and talk with folks since I blocked off this time anyway. Yehuda.
I have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to adjourning the official meeting? Hearing none, the official meeting is adjourned. And now we're all just hanging out in case anybody wants to talk about things. So I didn't think about this until just now. The only negative of it not being part of the official meeting is that this will not be included in the minutes. So if we talk about anything here that you would like a record of, just bring it up again at the next meeting, and that way it'll be included in the minutes. But if you are not, if you don't have anything to say, particularly to the exec board or to other members of the assembly, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming to what will be the most efficient meeting that GSG, I think, has ever had. Yeah.
I also want to mention, now that we're adjourned, there's no Parley Pro anymore, so time for chaos.
No, Kushbu, if you have things you'd like to say, go ahead.
I get to talk. That's new. Wait, that means I also actually had to put my headset on. Otherwise, you guys are going to hear an echo. Okay, but anyway, so I currently have, I think, one main article that I am writing for that is like grad student based. So I was wondering if you guys had any sourcing. It is about that fifth year or like higher year PhD students are having with funding or continuing their research past their fifth year. So if you have any sourcing, I will stick my email in the chat.
One thing, I think the university might have actually issued some sort of policy to allow current fifth years a sixth year, like kind of one extra year of stuff. But if you're not currently a fifth year, I think that they're